Bellabalaggio. I am happy to see that you guys could join us tonight. Some of you might have been in my presentation back in March. If so, it's nice to see you again. I'm a recovery support specialist in the My Recovery Connection program. I've been in this program for about 5 years now. So again, I'm glad you guys could join us tonight.
Thanks, Caron.
Yep.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jess Levan. I am also a recovery support specialist in the now newly named My Recovery Connection. A lot of words. I have been in this specific department now for about 3.5 years, but I've played a lot of different roles here at Caron over the last almost 18 years. And this is actually, I think, probably one of my first webinars. So here we go. We're going to see how this goes tonight, everyone. So thanks for being here. And as we're going along, if anyone has thoughts or questions or personal experiences, feel free to, type in the little chat box and we'll go from there.
So tonight we're going to be talking about sober summer fun, and we're obviously speaking to the family aspect of the recovery process, the good, the bad, the sunburned. So a lot of you, again, have a loved one in either early recovery or some maybe well along the way. And, we're approaching the summer season and there's a lot of different things that are going to be coming up. And so we're just going to discuss the different ways we can approach certain events and communication and things like that. So as we go along, if you have anything that you want to share, any comments or questions, please put them right there in the chat and I'll be able to keep track of that.
All right, so getting started here. So just, a couple odds and ends of things while we're getting started. I mean, first and foremost, if you are newly out of treatments or you are the loved one who has somebody who's just come out of treatment, there's going to be a lot of anxiety. There's going to be a lot of concerns, fears. Before anything else, like everyone just take a deep breath, let it out. Okay, because it's okay. All of these questions and these thoughts are absolutely normal. They're to be expected. Okay. And like we have here, in our PowerPoint, we're going to be like looking at the whole idea of what a new normal looks like. Okay. The way that things used to operate at home, it's not going to be the same anymore. We're going to be doing things a little bit different now. Okay. It's like it's a new day, fresh slate. Okay. So lots of different things going on here. All right. So as summer approaches, we're going to be faced with a lot of, challenges. All right. Whether that's you as somebody newly in recovery, whether that's you as a loved one, a family member, there's going to be a lot of things going on. And, it's like, how do we still have fun and remain sober? And like I tell a lot of people when I'm talking to them, honestly, if recovery is not going to be fun, why are we doing this? Right? Like you want to still live life and have a great time and do fun things, especially in the summer. It's starting to get warm here in Pennsylvania. We're really excited about that. So like, what do we do? What do we do when we're faced with these challenges? Okay. Whether that's, the beach, the pool, barbecues, there's going to be a lot of different things that are going to be popping up. And there's going to be a lot of questions and concerns about like, how do we navigate those events effectively and in a supportive way? Okay, so we can talk a little bit about that. There's going to be an increase in activities. Okay, you're going to be invited to more things. There's graduation parties, there's picnics, there's 4th of July, there's all the things. Okay, so with the increase in activities, our anxiety is absolutely going to go up. Again, not quite knowing maybe, are we doing this right? Okay, is it safe? What should we do? What shouldn't we do? Things of that nature. All right. But again, we're going to keep talking about these things tonight and what's going to be most effective.
Thanks, Jess.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Here we go. I've got it. Great. So planning ahead. So for your loved one or yourself, maintaining a healthy and positive sober circle, including others in recovery, family members, and close friends. And often we we understand that family members, there might be a lot of rebuilding of relationships and trust issues. And so you might find it really hard to be supportive when there's a lot of damage done from their active addiction. So bringing yourself to a point where you can at least meet your loved one where they're at, because they will get around to the amends process. So don't push that. So it's important for the person in recovery to maintain these close relationships. If there's a vacation plan, help and encourage your loved one to find and attend meetings ahead of time. There are meetings all over the place, multiple times a day. So you can typically find a meeting that works to your schedule. And we really encourage you to, if you're being accompanied by your loved one on a vacation, also seek out your own support at that time. So while maybe they find an AA meeting, you can find an Al-Anon meeting, or a smart recovery meeting for families. So there's a lot of options. So kind of being proactive in that so that your loved one can see you being supportive. Maybe it's something you can go to together if you want to accompany them to a meeting. But again, it's an opportunity to seek out your own support at the same time. Again, they're often available while on vacation. They have meetups in open parks, meetups at the beach. Like people get really creative depending on where you live, as far as what these meetings are going to look like as well. So communicate, and along with planning ahead, you want to communicate ahead of time the activities that you're going to be doing while on vacation, the environments that you're going to be in, the type of crowds you're going to be in. A lot of times if you end up at the beach, people bring alcohol on the beach, people are drinking on the boardwalk, and who knows what else. So just planning ahead and being aware of the environment that you and your loved one will be subjecting yourselves to. And also have a plan, have an exit strategy, if you will. So that checking in with your loved one throughout the night, like, hey, you feeling okay? Is everything okay? Do you need to leave? And then also accompany them leaving, right? So that's just a way of being supportive to them if they feel uncomfortable and feel they need to remove themselves from a certain environment or activity. Make a list together of these activities. Obviously sober activities, what that looks like, what your options are, depending on what your destination is. Make it together, and then so that you can plan that exit strategy if you need to get out of there. Again, recovery doesn't pause for family vacations. Again, we're not saying, the family vacation has to look completely different. However, it's just being more aware of what you have, what you say, what you're doing in front of your loved one who's kind of going through a sensitive time right now.
Okay. So communicating concerns, and hopefully like while your loved one was in treatment, you were able to have some family sessions and really kind of start to talk about communication in general. It's really, a very, very pinnacle concept. It really needs to happen. And the reality is not all of us are that great at communicating. We think we are, but sometimes we're really not. So it's going to be really, really important that the communication throughout just the recovery process in general continues in a healthy way. Okay. So the reality is your family vacation could really look much different this year. The first year for somebody, is going to look different in general. It's kind of like doing everything over again for the first time, but clean and sober. So summer vacations, birthdays, anniversaries, Christmas, New Year's Eve, like all of those things are going to look very different this year. So just understand like that it's okay. It's okay that it's going to look a little bit different. There's no right or wrong as to what that the new norm, the new holiday, the new vacation might look like. Okay. So, some helpful ways to communicate, just even in general. You want to really check in before, during, and after any sort of activity. So we talk a lot about at Caron, the whole idea, almost of like the sandwich, like I'm going to do something for my recovery. We're going to go do something fun. And then I'm going to follow up with something in recovery again. Okay. Just really checking in. So before, during, and after. Things could change. You could have a great idea to go do something that evening, like we're all good, we're all in agreement. You get there, and maybe it just gets a little bit hairy, shall we say. Okay. And that's all right. It's okay. But as long as everyone is talking about it and really checking in and kind of keeping a pulse on the situation, it's all right. Okay. Is everyone in agreement? Okay. And is everyone really okay with following the leader? Ultimately, your loved one in recovery, because right now they're kind of a leader in this process. Okay. Again, there could be things that you've done in the past during the summer on vacations, different types of activities or events. And, it's okay, well, we're just going to go to, Uncle Joe's barbecue like we normally would do. Well, maybe Uncle Joe has a lot of alcohol at that barbecue, and you might want to really reevaluate what that looks like this year. It's okay to say no. It's okay to decline an invite. If it's ultimately in the best interest of, you, your family, your loved one, it's okay. Okay. But maintaining the consistent communication is absolutely going to be imperative. Okay. I feel like we say that a lot. We probably do, but it's really,
Yes, it
really
is.
true. And we're really, really big on the communication piece. We're always talking about talking. So, communication is going to be really, really important with one another during this time. Okay. But discussing how they're thinking, how they're feeling about any upcoming events or activities, a day trip, even something as simple as a day trip. It might not be this big week, vacation to like the beach. I think we use that example a lot too. But it could be just something simple, like, maybe going to like an amusement park or, just some event over the summer. And those are great, because it's low key, it's a little bit maybe less intense, but a lot of those activities could absolutely have, alcohol. Like alcohol is available pretty much everywhere. So like, how does everybody feel about that? And
Yeah.
what do we do if the situation presents itself in the middle of said activity? What are we going to do about it?
Sure. And we definitely don't encourage avoidance, right?
Right.
Maybe, there's a difference between, being careful and checking your environment and surroundings prior to. But as Jess said, alcohol and other substances are going to be around regardless. You don't have control over them. You don't have control over what other people are doing, but you do have control over when you come, when you go, and what kind of exit strategy that's going to look like. And as Jess just explained, being able to have that communication with your loved one or having your loved one communicate that to you, the family support, and really making it a safe space so that they can feel comfortable saying to you, like, I don't feel comfortable right now. Can we get out of here? So really kind of creating that safe space for them when they're in an uncomfortable environment.
Mhm. Yeah. So are there any questions or any thoughts so far as we're going? Please feel free to, type in the chat box if you have a thought
Yeah,
or anything. We'd
please
love to hear
engage
from
in
you.
conversation amongst yourselves. If you have questions, we're here. So this is there's sober vacations available. They're all over the place. So we did want to share this with you. You will be provided with this PowerPoint presentation. So there are vacations all over the United States, outside of the United States, in the Mediterranean, in Europe, all sober vacations, all sober people going. And again, you don't have to just be sober to go. You can be a supporting family member to go as well. So that is an idea that could be really fun and have a nice like sober experience with your loved one if that's something that is reasonable for you to do.
Mhm.
So hosting and entertaining, a lot of patients leave us having so many questions about, well, what do I do when other people are drinking? And um, most patients will say, I don't want them to not drink because of me, right?
Mhm.
So that conversation is going to come up. It really is up to that person. So everybody's different. Some people might be triggered by others drinking in front of them so early in recovery, and others might be like, do not stop what you're doing, what you would normally do because of me, right? Hence why we encourage having that plan. So we know that cookouts are a part of summer fun. Hosting a picnic or a barbecue sets a lot of challenges, right? So as far as serving alcohol, if you are comfortable serving alcohol and that's okay with your loved one, that's up to you, right? However, maybe asking your guests to bring their own alcohol, and then when they leave, taking it with them. Um, Also having that disclosure conversation, right? There might be a loved one that doesn't really want to tell everybody that they're in recovery or isn't drinking or using anymore. Or you get just the opposite, somebody who might be comfortable disclosing this information and talking about it openly. By no means does your loved one in recovery have to disclose that information if they're not comfortable. But simply saying, I'm just not drinking anymore, or it's not for me, it could really go in a lot of different directions.
Mhm.
So, and again, do you disclose your loved one's recovery? That is a conversation that you will want to have with your loved one. You don't want to, you want to have that communication and say, like, okay, can we just get on the same page about who knows, who doesn't know, who you don't mind? It really is important to have that conversation so that you're not disclosing to people that your loved one might not want them to have that information. Um, and how do you manage a guest that might be intoxicated? Asking them to leave or getting transportation for them, having another family member drive them home, getting an Uber, things like that. Um, and how do you, the family member, practice self care during this time, right? So, what might be triggering for you? So, if maybe your loved one kind of like drifts off for a little bit and they're like, hey, I haven't seen, Timmy in an hour. So that might kind of draw up some old emotions. So again, like planning ahead, what can you turn, who can you turn to for your support at this time? Again, just like we encourage the one in recovery to have their own support circle, or their own sober circle, we definitely encourage you to get engaged with your own support as well. So that when these things do happen, you're talking to somebody else and you're communicating and engaging with somebody else who also has a loved one in recovery. So they can, your minds are just in sync, right? Because they know exactly what you're going through. And are you sharing your thoughts and feelings with your loved one? So when you feel those triggers, instead of, building resentment for that person, being able to communicate that to you, like say, like, hey, like when you kind of like, when I didn't see you for 45 minutes at the barbecue, I was wondering like where you went and what you were doing. Again, there's a way to say these things without coming off accusatory. So just kind of be careful in the language and the tone when you present these questions so that you can have a productive conversation and they don't feel attacked.
Mhm.
Any questions or comments around that?
Carmen, I wanted just to piggyback for a second, if
Sure,
I
of
could.
course.
Going back to the whole disclosure of one's recovery. And this is something that I feel very passionate about, but it is that individual story to tell.
Mhm.
We've absolutely had, situations where someone has come home from treatment and everybody knows, and they wanted to be the one to share that with family and friends. So maybe having that conversation while they're still, in treatment or as soon as they come out of treatment, like, okay, we have, the family asking, we have the friends down the street, the neighbors, the church friends, whoever. Just the whole idea of like, what do we tell them? Which comes up a lot. Like, what do we tell them? And a lot of times people will say, they're just kind of working on themselves right now, just spending some time to themselves. I think coming out of a pandemic, the whole idea of really working on one's mental health, and that's across the board. That applies to all of us right now.
Recovery or not.
Right, yes, recovery or not, a lot of us have had to do a lot of work on our mental health during a pandemic. So, even something as simple as, they're just kind of working on themselves right now, taking some mental health days. We all love a good mental health day. So just making sure that you are communicating about what that disclosure is going to look like. Again, it is, the one in recovery, it's their story to tell. They've done a lot of work to get to that point. So we want to make sure that they have the opportunity to share that story themselves.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jess.
Mm-hmm.
So any comments, questions around that, please feel free to put it in the chat, or you can just ask straight out.
Okay, So speaking of self-care, we're really big on self-care.
I love
Um,
self-care.
we love self-care. I think Carm, you just had some self-care earlier tonight, right? So, I think the funny thing is when I think of self-care, and maybe it's just because I've been in this field now for like 20 years, everyone goes to, oh, well, how are you taking care of yourself? Like, I'm going to yoga. And there is nothing wrong with yoga. Let me just say that, okay? Before I start getting emails saying, oh my God. Yeah, no, everything is fine with yoga, but there are so many other amazing things that one can do other than yoga for self-care. Okay. But how do you, as the family member, manage your own self-care and your own concerns and things like that? I mean, the reality is you're doing a lot of taking care of, okay? And the family members, just like Carmela and myself, we're helpers, and helpers need help a lot. Like we do. We need a lot of help and a lot of support. So how are you going to manage that? What is that going to look like? Okay. Carm, did I see a question pop up?
Yeah, so Jesse says, what if the person in recovery wants to keep it to himself?
Hmm.
So how I go about that, or what I encourage is, especially in those first couple of months, like it is that person's business. So it's completely up to them who knows about that. And because it's a very private part of somebody's life and it's so very personal. So it's completely on them. Again, a lot of people do get those questions of, well, where were you at for 30 days? And why aren't you drinking anymore? And I always encourage people to say, I was dealing with something personal, but everything's okay now. Thanks for asking, and move it along. I find that when you use that word personal, people tend to back off a little bit, as opposed to using the excuse of, well, I was taking care of a medical condition, or, because that warrant, that might bring on and more questions, right? But if you use the word personal, a lot of people tend to back off. So if that person wants to keep the recovery to themselves, that's okay too. However, it will eventually come out down the line, and that person can simply say, like, I'm just not drinking anymore, or I'm not using anymore. It wasn't for me, and I've moved past that. By no means is anybody obligated to tell their story, right? So it's completely up to that person in recovery.
Mhm.
So Trish says, on self-care, generally when there's a relapse or active using, what are helpful thoughts, phrases, mantras that parents could say to themselves instead of obsessing in fear?
Oh, that's a great one. That's really a great one. Honestly, and it might sound kind of like basic and kind of simple, but just something as simple as I'm doing the best I can.
Yeah.
Because you are, you absolutely are. You know, yeah, we're talking about self-care, and we're talking about, the client usually being the person who the focus is on, but we, the family members, we go through a lot as well, things that our loved one in recovery might not have ever really realized or been able to hear just because of the space that they were in. Um, Self-care can come in the form of yoga, a mani, a pedi, going for a massage, and it can also look like setting a really healthy boundary with your loved one. Maybe that's, like, I'm not feeling well. Can you call my boss and let them know I'm not going to be in today? No, I'm not going to do that. It's your responsibility now. Just things like that, like setting really healthy boundaries. And again, that's something that's going to take practice. That's definitely going to take time because it's probably going to feel kind of weird for a while. And that's okay too. But literally, you need to keep practicing setting the boundaries.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So
Mhm.
I'm seeing in the chat, I've experienced the longer I am sober, it becomes easier to share my sobriety. So as I said a couple of minutes ago, a lot of
Yeah.
times, like a few months down the line, it's going and you're attending meetings, you're engaging in a program, whether that's not AA, whether it's Smart Recovery, Celebrate Recovery, Dharma Recovery. It's just when you really engage in those programs and it's solid, then you really do eventually feel comfortable talking about it. So I know for me personally, I am very comfortable with people knowing my business. So I was kind of out with it, right? When I stopped drinking. And not that you have to be with it, but it really, really, really helps when you can just not have to fear, like, all right, well, who knows what and who am I around, and having to check yourself each time you're surrounded by people who might not know. And again, it could just simply be like, I'm not drinking anymore. It wasn't for me. And things like that. But those in recovery tend to think like, oh my God, people are going to wonder why I'm drinking. And when you really think about it, how many times have you gone to an occasion or event or a wedding and said like, oh my God, is she drinking or not drinking? You know what I mean? People really don't care at the end of the day. So getting comfortable talking about it, whether that starts off in whatever support group, in whatever respective support group that your loved one chooses, getting comfortable talking about it in those rooms, then in your personal life, it'll become easier to have that conversation with people. Because people actually really look at it like, wow, like that's a pretty courageous thing to do. So you kind of get more like compliments when you disclose to somebody that you're in recovery. People actually have great things to say, because 9 times out of 10, that person is close with somebody who is struggling with addiction, or they know somebody, or they themselves is in recovery. So, or you're on vacation and they ask to drink. So what do you think about that?
Oh, all right. So you're on vacation and what your loved one who's in recovery asks to drink? If that's kind of like a different can here, but no, okay, and it absolutely can happen. I mean, the reality is at the end of the day, it's their recovery, and they're going to pick and choose and make decisions, good or bad, and that's just going to kind of be how it's going to be. I would definitely set a boundary with it. I would absolutely let them know, like, you are not in support of that. Just and let them know and see if they can have some dialogue about it, have a conversation about it. Okay, so you want to drink. Well, why is it that you want to drink? Like, what's coming up in you? Are you being triggered? Is there something happening? Are we in a situation that maybe you weren't quite ready for? Like, how can we sort of kind of bring it down a level, so to speak, for the night, and kind of get situated? Would it be helpful for you to call your sponsor, or get like on a Zoom meeting or something of that nature? But again, like, you get to set the boundary with what you're comfortable with as well.
Mhm. And again, your loved one in recovery is really trying to like rebuild that trust, and rebuild relationships early on. So I would kind of wonder like why that they're asking you if they can drink. Like,
Mhm.
in my mind, I'm thinking, no, of course you can't drink. Like, you just went to rehab and no, you can't drink. So, but that also factors into that planning ahead and having those conversations like, hey, we're going to dinner here. They serve alcohol. There's gonna be a bunch of people walking around drinking. What's that going to look like? And things like that. But again, it all comes down to communication. What does that
Mhm.
look like? And as Jess mentioned, like being able to hold boundaries. Like if you aren't going to take your recovery seriously and you want to come out and you're asking me to drink, then we can't go out together anymore because I don't support that. So that's
Mhm.
kind of what an example of a boundary. Maybe it doesn't have to be that, aggressive, but really understanding where that person is.
Mhm.
Early recovery is so sensitive. So even the thought of like, well, can I drink? It shouldn't be a thought, right? If somebody is working a solid program, they're not going to ask if they can have a drink.
Mhm. And thinking about the whole planning ahead piece, I was just kind of thinking back. I think we were just having this discussion the other day about, the whole idea of when someone is, new in recovery, they're just coming out of treatment, they've just been home for a very short period of time. Everyone's like in a real good space, right? Ideally, everyone's feeling really good. Okay, we have a plan, we know what we're doing. That's the time to really kind of, if you haven't maybe real definitively, that's the time to really kind of plan the what if and have like the what if conversation. Okay, so what if we're on vacation and dot dot dot, fill in the blank. You're triggered, you want to drink, you do drink, like that's the time to have the conversation when everyone's really in a good space, everyone's communicating well, everyone is open-minded. In the heat of the moment, kind of like in that acute, like situation, that's not the time to try to like figure out, okay, what the heck do we do now? Because emotions are going to be running really high. There's going to be a lot of anxiety, a lot of hurt, resentments could come up again. So when everyone's in a good space and kind of, you know, even keel, like that's the time to really kind of have that conversation. You know, like, what do you want me to do if you ask me if you can drink, if like what do you want me to say? Like kind of getting some feedback from your loved one about things when they're in a clear state of mind that they would want to hear at that time during that risky situation, that risky, you know, time or event.
Absolutely. So kind of going back to self-care for you, while your loved one might seem to be the focus, you also play a major role and make an impact in this process. Again, going back to how are you being supported? Because you also need support at that time too. And maybe your loved one in recovery can't necessarily bring themselves to support you, because again, like recovery can be kind of a selfish process, at least those first couple of months when everybody's trying to figure out their process. But really like getting involved and engaged in your own support groups again. So you have like-minded individuals that you can connect with when something comes up. Do you attend any support groups or individual therapy, and what does that look like, right? And sure, I hear a lot, well, my friends are really supportive, and that's great. It's wonderful, but there's a sober circle and then your social circle, right? So your friends and family obviously would be your social circle, and your sober circle are the people who you connect with, hopefully in Al-Anon, Nar-Anon, Alateen, you know, all of those support groups. There's a lot of options. And what does communication look like? Are you rebuilding your relationship and trust with your loved one? And how does that affect you? And being able to ask yourself these questions and really like setting time to throughout the week or maybe once a week to really touch base with your loved one, see how they're doing, ask how you can be supportive, ask if they're okay, and then, you know, and make that a regular thing and stay consistent with that.
Yeah, we're really big fans of family meetings. We will encourage that until, you know, like the cows come home. Literally, it's really important, whether that's like once a week over dinner or, hey, after dinner, we're going to go for like a little walk and just kind of talk, but really talking about like what is happening, like for me individually, for you individually. At that point, talking about things that are coming up for the week. So everyone's on the same page, making sure that you know what meetings your loved one is getting to, as well as maybe some meetings or support groups that you're going to be going to, you know, that week, just so everyone's on the same page and everyone can really help support one another.
Any questions about this slide or any comments or anything you'd like to share?
Okay, so practicing patience. I'm sure we could all take some pointers on this slide. We all have our moments, right? And that's okay. We're human. But it is really important, you know. So how do you maintain your mental health? Again, going back to those mental health days, right? How do you maintain it? Like, how do you practice patience? How do you feel okay with, you know, where you're at and what's really happening? So again, here's some, you know, just some pointers here, some suggestions, things that might be helpful to you as an individual. Meditation. Meditation is really a really awesome technique. I know for me, I struggled with that like initially because I was like, okay, so what do I do? Like just close my eyes and I don't know, whatever happens,
I think
happens.
a lot of people think of the monks, right?
Yes, like the
And,
old,
you know,
yeah,
and meditation,
right,
but it's such a
right.
deeper process than maybe that, and it's a little more modern. So I'm actually going to type up a couple of really helpful meditation apps in the chat.
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
yeah.
Jessica.
No, I was gonna say, Carmen, like you are like the meditation app queen.
Yes.
So she has all sorts of great apps that she can share. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, meditation is a great one. Journaling, I am a huge fan of journaling. I absolutely love journaling. It does not have to make sense what you're writing. It could be Dear Diary. It could be whatever you want, Dear Bob, if that's what you call your diary. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's an awesome way to just get those thoughts out of your head and onto a piece of paper. And then the really cool thing about it is maybe the next day or a couple weeks, or even a couple months later, you can go back and read what you wrote. You can really look at the progress that you have made. This is where I was at this time and look how far I've come since. It's a really cool concept. I love it.
Yeah.
Spending time outside and in nature. And Carmela and I are big on this one.
Nature walk.
We are like the nature walk girls. Sometimes we're on the phone talking while we're walking.
Yes.
Like it's nice. I know for me, if I'm not on the phone with Carmela while I'm taking my walk, I have my buds in and I'm listening to my music, which is a really great thing for me to just kind of get me into the zone and put me in a good place. So I absolutely love that as well.
Yeah. And for me, when I go for my walks, I actually listen to podcasts. So there are definitely a bunch of recovery podcasts and family support type of podcasts. So I can absolutely put that. If you have any, I can actually just put my email address here. And if you would like, you can email me if you'd like me to pass some of those on. A lot of times it doesn't even need to be like a recovery related app or podcast. It could be something funny, something motivational. There's so many different types of podcasts, but being outside, getting some fresh air, taking a walk and listening, it's my favorite time. I mean, it's almost spring. So this is like my favorite time of year when I actually get to do that. It's very peaceful. So I absolutely encourage everyone to just get outside and get fresh air. I mean, it really does the trick.
Absolutely. So, part of practicing patience as well, just kind of like asking yourself and being real, like, are you really being like transparent in your communication with your loved one? Are you saying what you're thinking and feeling, or are you kind of like beating around the bush, because that really kind of plays, into old patterns and old behaviors that ultimately could have led everyone to kind of where we're at currently, so it's a new day. We're trying different things. We want to do, just different things, try different techniques. So, are you having those conversations? And some of the conversations, like, let's be real, they're not going to always be easy or fun to have. And they can be a little scary and they can be a little intimidating at times. But if everyone is playing their part, okay, in this process, and everyone is truly committed to a different lifestyle, there's absolutely ways to have those conversations, even if they're kind of challenging or a little bit awkward, and still, kind of get to the end and get to a place where everybody feels comfortable. Okay. And same thing, are you open to receiving feedback about the role that you play? And this ties back to, I think maybe a slide or two ago where, we talk about, the person in early recovery, the client, so to speak, that's really where the focus tends to be for a large portion of this. But we all have a role that we play. Just because that person's in recovery and that person was the client doesn't mean that they don't have some really good feedback and some good insight as well. So it's really important to be mindful and really open to one another. And if you say you're going to be open to feedback, like, truly be open to the feedback. Like, it's not fun to always hear, but sometimes.
Yes, you can say you're open to feedback, and then when they give you the feedback, you get defensive or you argue, or it's well, tell me a time, give me an example, like that. It's like, oh my God, like who can think of just an example on the spot? It's like, so I feel like when you try to give people feedback, sure, it's helpful to have examples, but really being able to honestly be in a position or the headspace to receive that feedback, because I'm sure that you've had some feedback for your loved one somewhere along this way, right? So again, like just being open-minded about and transparent in those conversations so that everything's clear, you guys are on the same page, and it just works better that way.
Absolutely. I mean, we do talk a lot about the idea of like I feel statements. And again, it might seem very basic, but they work. And it's a good starting point. So I feel frustrated when ... you fill in the blank. Or I feel frustrated, upset, concerned. It bothers me when, whatever that might look like. And start there and kind of build on that conversation as you continue to just sort of grow and build with your communication as a whole.
Yeah. Let's see. So I do see that we have a question. If your loved one is in recovery, if your loved one in recovery doesn't live in the same home, but maybe in a sober living situation, how do you check in without getting too enmeshed in their personal recovery?
Mm, that's a good question.
So again, being able to understand that if they're in a sober living situation, then they're probably already enmeshed in their own program, and hopefully they have it down to a routine every day what they're doing. So instead of just saying like, did you get to a meeting today? What did you do? What did you talk about? What's going on over there? You want to kind of keep it general and personal, like how are you feeling? And things like that. You just want to be able to check in with them, how they're doing mentally, emotionally, and things like that. You want to kind of keep it general, offer your support, be validating, and also always remember to like give them praise. It I feel like it's often overlooked, but even just saying like, I'm so proud of you for being in sober living. I'm so proud of you for making that decision to follow through with that. What you say, the tone you say it in, and the language you use are so important because they're already in like a very tough position, and they're already kind of struggling with a lot of things, a lot of moving parts. So being validated by a loved one or family member is such a great feeling. I can't explain.
Mhm.
So again, just keeping it general, checking in about them and not their recovery.
Right. And even the whole idea, honestly, like kind of like telling on yourself a little bit, right? Like you're part of the process too.
Mhm.
Family members, like we're learning how to change and how to advance and just have better communication. So I think sometimes even just, reaching out to your loved one and saying, okay, I'm going to be completely transparent with you. I'm having some anxiety because I don't know what you're doing from day to day. And I
Yeah.
want to check in with you, but I also don't want to, be like bothering you. I don't want to be constantly hovering over you. So like asking your loved one, like, what do you think about that? Like how often is it appropriate for me to check in with you? Are you okay if I give you a call like maybe twice a week and just kind of check
Mhm.
in a little bit about how your day's going or what your week's been like? I mean, they're going to really appreciate you taking the time to really check in with them and get their feedback on that situation. And it's completely okay. Like you're allowed to tell on yourself and ask them for help because they're kind of the experts right now when it comes to that piece.
Yeah.
So it's okay.
Yeah. And as Jess said, like being just very transparent and just asking straight out, like, how can I best be supportive to you through this
Mhm.
process? And they might just tell you, right? Also, designating maybe, if it's reasonable for your schedules, even designating a couple of days out of the week, like, hey, like maybe Tuesday and Thursday nights around like 8 o'clock, I'll give you a call and we can talk about our weeks and keep it light,
Mhm.
really light. Okay. Keep it light, keep it positive. And again, always say, like, what do you need from me? How can I best support you through this?
Mhm. Absolutely.
Okay, so let's see. Any other questions or anything any of you would like to share with us?
Yeah, does anybody have anything coming up this summer that you're maybe in the process of planning, trying to figure out what, vacation is going to look like this summer, what the family reunion is going to look like this summer,
Yeah.
or people who've gone through this process, like what did you do? What was helpful to you? What did your family do, and how were they able to support you?
Yeah. If anybody has experience, maybe this is somebody's second time around going through this, or, everybody's at like a different spot in their process. So it could look very, very different depending on, is it your first month of recovery? Is it your 12th month of recovery? So those conversations can look very different depending on those factors. So if anybody has anything they want to share or any tips or anything like that, please do so in the chat. Um, we do say that this is a process and change won't happen overnight. And you're probably going to hear that repeatedly from your loved one or in your
Mhm.
support groups. And it might get annoying. I've heard that a few times. I'm sick of being told that it's not an overnight change. And it's like anything good, right? Anything with substance and quality is not going to just happen overnight. There's a lot of practices. There's a lot of just changing, rebuilding, evolving, development that each of you are going through. Everybody's going through this own process. So we're their own process. That's why we say addiction is a family disease. It's not just the person in a recovery that's going through something. So everybody has an emotional process, a mental process through all of this. So just really, really have patience. And if you ever find yourself in a situation where you feel like you're losing your patience, instead of freaking out on your loved one or your husband or whatever that might look like, your wife, whatever that might look like for you, just be able to say, like, you know what, I'm not in a position to discuss this right now. Like, I need a minute. And even for you, again, going back to that self-care component, that's so very important that you're okay, so that you know, again, how to best support your loved one in recovery. So if you need to step away from certain conversations, if you need to just get outside again, get some air, take a walk for a couple of minutes to decompress, like, absolutely gift that to yourself. Okay, I see a couple of things popping up in the chat. So a trip to Ireland. Laura, we might need you for this one. I'm not so worried. I'm not so worried about being tempted, but I am planning on finding meetings and being very connected with my program and aware that there will be a lot of drinking. I have a great support group and I'll lean on them. Perfect. So
That's
you're aware that you're going to Ireland, and we know how the Irish like to get down. So, so yeah, I mean, even going to, even just in Europe in general, like, drinking is very willy-nilly around there, only because it's, they're exposed to it so early on in life that, when they get to middle age, it's just a thing, right? So I'm so glad to hear that. If it sounds like you have a plan in place already, you're already staying connected with your program, and, just being able to check in with those supports along the way, like getting on the plane. I just landed, just unpacked my stuff. I mean, you don't have to give a play-by-play, but you get it, just checking in with your support and really just staying tethered to your recovery, no matter what that might look like. If you have to jump on a Zoom meeting, if you get to an in-person meeting, and just making sure that you're having those conversations along the way with your sober support.
Right. I think too, also, you're just acknowledging the fact that, like, you're doing something fun in recovery, and I mean, Ireland has amazing things. I mean, go kiss the Blarney Stone, and, go find a leprechaun, and all the fun things. Like, there is a lot of really cool things. And a trip to Ireland, oh my gosh, I'm so jealous right now, to be honest with you.
It's beautiful. I went there like 20 years ago. It's beautiful.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, like, just enjoy it, like, take it in, and, like, just sort of, like, rub it in, enjoy the moment, because you're doing that, like, clean and sober, and it's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. I needed to just hear that feedback. Thank you so much. I am very excited, and I'm ready. I'm ready for it. Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that, because now, you're going to get to go and, like, really experience such a beautiful place through a sober lens. Right. And
yeah,
again,
absolutely.
Kind of going back to those words, like gifting that to yourself, you're gifting that to yourself. Right. I had a conversation with a client of mine earlier today. And, and I said to her, like, the best thing that you can give to yourself is sobriety, right? That is something that nobody can take away from you. So if you got it and you're in a good space, then whatever you're doing in your program and for your self-care and for those, lifestyle everyday changes that I'm sure you had to adjust to, like, that is a gift to yourself that nobody can take from you. And that is hard work and an investment that you put into yourself. So I hope you have an amazing time in Ireland. I'm really, really excited for you.
I'll keep you posted.
Please do.
Please do.
So here's another question in the chat. We have a yearly family vacation / reunion around July 4th. The adult children often drink heavily a couple nights. My adult son in recovery says he wants to go for a part of the week and that he'll be okay around it. But if I find that I'm worried or fearsome, how do I deal? So honestly, it's just very simple. Just keeping those questions general and letting your son know, like, hey, look, I'm glad that he's only going for part. I feel that, like, I know with Jess and I, like, the clients that her and I share together, often have, and Laura and myself as well, if there's a vacation coming up, then the person in recovery typically only pops in for like maybe 2 days instead of the week, or just a couple of days, or instead of staying at the lake house, like maybe just getting a hotel so they're not around the heavy drinking, but can join you during the day for certain activities. But again, like planning ahead and having a conversation with your son and really letting him know, like, hey, listen, I'll be there. I'll support you. If you feel uncomfortable, just like let me know. We can go for a walk. We can go do something sober together. You know, if he feels like he needs to remove himself. So again, like just having that communication and reminding your son, like, I'm here for whatever you need. So how can I be supportive of you? Right.
Right. Right. And again, going back to that whole idea of having the conversation about like what to do if prior to getting to, the family reunion.
So let's see, here's another one. How do you handle when a loved one wants to go to an event together, like a concert, but you feel uncomfortable doing so? Should you just tell them that and share why? So that would be you accompanying them to a concert. God, so I've been there with my mother actually. So it was Zach Brown band, I believe. But just being able, again, communication. If you're going to be there with them, then you can kind of gauge if they're feeling comfortable or not. Again, like planning ahead, having that conversation. If you really just don't feel comfortable altogether, then be honest with that and say like, hey, like there's drinking that goes on in concerts. That's like the place to do it, whether in the parking lot, you go in there, people, the whole day is just revolved around drinking. So maybe check in with your loved one and just say, hey, is this the best idea for us to do now? And just say, I'm not sure I feel comfortable putting you in that type of situation. And then really open up that space to have dialogue, to hear their feedback around that as well.
And maybe even suggesting another activity that you could do together, something that maybe isn't quite a concert, but it's not just sitting like in the park, like something else in between that you both maybe would really enjoy and that you would both feel comfortable doing together. Because I think doing those kinds of things together is really, really important in early recovery.
Absolutely.
And as a family.
Yeah. And if you're a close-knit family, or even if you're not and you're rebuilding, like just having that connection again with your loved one and really like just being supportive of them. What do you need? What else can we do? What are the alternatives? Again, like back to planning ahead and having communication with each other, right? Because you don't want to get to the concert and be like, you know what? I really thought this was a bad idea, right? And it's like, well, why didn't you say anything? So really share those thoughts and feelings with your loved one, and hopefully you guys can come to a compromise or just really have a good solid plan in place. So let's see. My son selected a non-legitimate halfway house. How do I convince him to an NARR certified sober living?
Okay. That's a tough one. Yeah. I think in my experience, a lot of times there are reasons why sometimes, people will choose the, not so great places to go. At that point, I have to kind of wonder, like, well, like where is where's his motivation? Like, is he really trying to do this? Is there something else going on? Is there another reason why he tried that? Sometimes, and I know this isn't always maybe like the popular answer, but sometimes they kind of have to come to like the realization on their own to some degree. And that's really hard for family to hear. But again, I would really just let him know, like, hey, like, this is how I feel about it. Again, at the end of the day, I understand it's your choice and you're going to do what you're going to do with this. But this is how I feel about it. I'm uncomfortable. Whatever it is that you're feeling, and just let him know that you are always willing to have dialogue and conversation if you were to change his mind about that or want to try some sort of different aftercare type of placement, that you would be, happy to help him get to, wherever that might be.
Exactly. So like being able to present options, and even you can absolutely even call, like if you have a couple places in mind, you can certainly call and book a tour, right? And you can say, what I like to do, if I'm presenting something like that, whether it's in my personal life or my professional life, like really just coming up with a plan ahead of time so that you're not just saying like, well, I don't want you there. I want you somewhere else, and not really having evidence or reasoning behind it. I would go on a certified sober living website. I would read reviews, do your homework, so that when you present these options to him, you can say like, hey, listen, this place, it got great reviews. We can go on a tour. Let's pick a date where we can both do that. And again, just really having conversation and just like pointing out all like the positive points of your ideas and these options, so that they can take a look at it and be like, you know what? Okay, maybe like, let's talk about it. Like, let's have a conversation. You just can't be too forceful, right? It's a conversation. It's not you necessarily trying to be convincing. You're just suggesting something else, because if you push it too much on them, then that might drive a wedge between the two of you, and resentment might build. So you just want to be really careful. Again, back to like the language, the tone, and how you present these things and communicate. So we have another one. So ballpark, unbelievable beer everywhere. Absolutely. Should we just not bring him? He is not sober anymore.
Ballparks
So,
are a tough one, especially this time of year. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, the second you walk in, it's like vendors, and it's
well, before you walk in,
before you walk in,
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, it's crazy. That might be, one of those situations where, maybe you don't do that right now. Or maybe you have some conversation about like what that's really going to look like. What are the expectations going to be? I mean, you want to enjoy the activity. So whatever activity you're ultimately doing together, like you guys want to enjoy it, right? So if you're going to go do something like go to a ball game or whatever, and you're going to be on edge and stressed out like the whole time, kind of like watching and making sure that something doesn't happen, or this one doesn't drink or doesn't drink too much, because again, it's their choice and maybe they have chosen to, start drinking. Then is it kind of worth going right now? Is it worth
Yeah.
going? Is it worth inviting, that person to that activity? Again, maybe you can find something else that you could do that would be a little bit more low key, that might be a little bit more supportive of a recovery lifestyle. And then it doesn't put anybody in that situation and no one has to stress about it.
Yeah, because I mean that I would maybe not bring him, because if he's not sober anymore, the likelihood of him like, hey, I'm going to the bathroom, and then sneaking a beer or whatever,
Yep.
right? The likelihood of that would increase, right? So we kind of want to stay away from those types of places if that person isn't sober anymore, right? And maybe thinking of other places, especially like, again, it's spring, right? And summer's just right around the corner, and it's getting nicer out. There's so many different activities, even just Googling local activities in the community and things to do. A lot of times they post like a huge like projector screen in like local parks and have like movie nights and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
So, people get really creative. And even if you simply type in sober fun near me, you'd be surprised at the things that pop up. So just like being really creative in your ideas of like, okay, well, what can we do that we don't have to be drinking? Or if there's drinking around, it's not like right in your face, like maybe go into the bowling alley, things like that. The arcade, me and Jess love that stuff.
I know, it's awesome.
So yeah, and even just trying things maybe out of your comfort zone as well, and joining that person. There is, and I'm going to write it down because I have another app to share. It's called Mind Body. And this app you go on the app, you type in your zip code, and there's a lot of like health and wellness stuff, a lot of fitness classes, acupuncture, meditation, and things like that. So whatever is close to you and in your area on the Mind Body app, that's something you could just go and pick up, like a yoga class and things like that. And you can meet new people and do sober activities. Like there's a lot of options on that app. So I would absolutely encourage all of you to check it out. Anything else? Any other questions? You're welcome.
We've talked a lot about communication tonight. We've thrown out a whole lot of options, a whole lot of what ifs and what to do if, and oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. And, and if anybody has any questions, you absolutely can reach out to Carmela or myself, and we can try and help you, guide you in the right direction. If there's something that would be helpful that either, any of you need, let us know. We appreciate everyone hopping on tonight and spending a little bit of time with us.
Thank you, ladies.